In this video, we're gonna show you how to do a DIY install of these Hexagon garage lights. Now, we all know that lighting for detailing is extremely important, but for some people, their garage is their safe space. It's their sanctuary. It's where they come out in the garage and get some therapy by wiping down their car, ceramic coating, whatever it is. And having a nice aesthetic in your garage is amazing. So Hexagon lights like this can enhance that. Now, in this video, we're gonna go through everything from planning out the space or planning where you wanna put the lights to how we flush mount them to drywall or a drywall ceiling, and also even utilizing drop ceiling brackets. So follow along with me in this video and learn how to do a perfect DIY install of these Hexagon lights. Before you start screwing lights into your ceiling or hanging them with the drop ceiling brackets, you want to create a plan. The better planning you do for this process, the easier the install piece of it is going to be. So first things first, determine where you want to put the lights. In this garage, we're going to put them this way, and then we switched over here because they fit better here and it will fill the garage more with light. Another thing to think about is how many amps the Hexagon garage lights pull. They pull about 7.6 amps. And in this case, you could put 2 sets of lights in here, but each one of the plugs that we're gonna run this off of run off the same breaker, which is a 15 amp breaker. So we're right on the cusp, if not just over the cusp, where every time that we would turn both sets of lights on, it would trip the breaker. So in this garage, it's a little bit smaller space and at home, not a shop, we wanna run 1 set of lights, and running it side to side actually works better for the aesthetic of this garage. 2 sets of lights can almost be overpowering. You need to understand the space that you're working in. So an at-home garage, I think warrants just 1 set of lights. If you're in a bigger shop where you have multiple spaces of cars and maybe lifts, you can maybe get away with 2 sets of lights. After we determine where we're gonna put the lights, what we wanted to do is measure that space so then we could figure out where to start. So as we build it out, it centers itself. The lights measuring long ways is 16.5 feet, which is 198 inches. Now, what we did is we determined that 18 inches from this wall over as a starting point will then center our lights long ways. Now, if you are somebody that is working in a space that's less than 198 inches, consider building the hex lights but not building the full kit, okay? This kit is something that is customizable, okay? You don't need to finish a connection for the lights to work. So even if you have an exposed Y connector or an exposed end of a light, when you plug them in, they will still work functionally. So if anything, you can get creative in how you design your lighting setup. It's almost like having Legos with no building manual. Now, along with centering the lights long ways, we also determined that 1 inch off of this portion of the thing would center it from front to back. So we took a 1 inch piece of tape, lined it along that side. So now we know that it will also be centered front to back and long ways. So essentially what we did is we created a tape corner, okay, which determines where our first hexagon will be mounted. Now in this garage, we actually have a portion of the ceiling that is lower. So we actually have a straight edge to work off of. If you have a garage where your whole ceiling is flat, making sure to have a corner or a section taped off like this will allow your lights to be installed parallel with the walls or the space that you're working in. So what happens is it won't be diagonal or crooked once you've built it. You wanna have at least 1 drill that you can use drill bits and or Phillips head screwdriver bits. You wanna have a drill bit kit. You also want a hammer or a small hammer. The last thing I'll say, if you're using the drop ceiling brackets, have a level with you. Now, along with planning where you're gonna put the lights, measuring your space so it's centered, you also wanna consider how you're gonna power your lights or where you're gonna plug them in at. Now, these hex lights come with a standard 3-prong plug that goes into sort of a standard outlet. In this case, what we're gonna do is we're gonna get an adapter for the light socket on the ceiling, and we will plug in the hex lights into the adapter that goes into the light socket. And what that does, it makes it extremely easy for us because now we can plug it in, we can flip the switch and it turns the lights on. So my hex lights now become my primary light source for my garage. Along with this, make sure that when you are planning this out and you're thinking about the exterior connectors of your light, one of those is a Y connector like this, okay? The exterior, you'll either have an L connector like this. One of them has to be a Y connector. The reason being is this is where you plug in the cord for the power source, okay? So depending on how you're going to position your lights and where they're gonna sit, pick one of the outside connectors, make that the Y connector so it's the easiest place where you run the cord to power your lights. I went ahead and built this hexagon, and I built this with the intention of it being in the corner. So as you can see, I will be laying this out so the flat side goes against that wall, and I have an elbow connector here, an elbow connector here, and an elbow connector here because I'm not going to be building off that way. But I have Y connectors on the other three portions of the hex point. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to mount this first, and then I'll start building off of these Ys to then build the rest of my full hexagon light pot. You're going to take the hex light up, position it inside the corner, mark off the things, and then start drilling for the drywall anchors, and then we'll start screwing in the hex light to start. Now you might be noticing that I'm not using the drywall anchor on this one specifically. One hexagon by itself weighs 2 pounds. These things are extremely light. Every other one, we put a drywall anchor in. Okay, just to make sure it's secure and we do it right for the most part. But because this lighting system is so light, you don't need a drywall anchor every single thing. Once we get into the drop ceiling brackets, then we'll start thinking more about where we want to place the drywall anchors. Another thing is I'm not screwing in the screws all the way into the flush mounted lights to the ceiling. And then once I have everything installed onto the ceiling where I'm flush mounting it, then I will screw all the rest of the screws in. What I highly recommend doing is grabbing the plug-in for the lights and plugging it into one of the exposed connectors. You want to make sure that the lights are currently working. At least half the lights are working, because what you don't want to do is build this whole thing, plug it in, and then it doesn't work, right? I just check your progress along the way. We're finished with the flush mount installation on this portion of the ceiling. Now we're going to transition to installing it to the recessed portion of the ceiling where it's raised, in which we need to use the drop ceiling brackets. Now, one quick note is when you're installing it to the flush mount side, or if you're flush mounting everything, as you install it, make sure to not fully screw in the lights or the connectors. You want a little bit of wiggle room so it's easier to connect the light to the connector. Okay, if you flush mount it all the way by screwing it in all the way, it's a lot harder to connect the light. So save the screwing it in all the way to the very end. Now moving on to the drop ceiling brackets. Okay, they're gonna come in a bag like this within your kit, and it will come as individually packaged brackets. All right. Now I'm gonna show you right now how to configure this, because when I tried to figure it out the first time, it was pretty confusing. So I want to save you some time here. Open the bag. You'll take out the bracket, and for right now, you can set aside the drywall anchors as well as the longer screws. There's going to be 3 screws in here. One is for the anchors, one is for the actual bracket. So setting aside the longer screws and the drywall anchors, what you want to do is unravel the wire first. Now you'll notice that on the wire, on one side, you will have a portion that is closed off here, and then you have a portion that is open-ended. Now you'll have another connector piece here, and you're gonna push this to the part to the closed off end so it can't fall off. Now, one thing you'll notice on this piece on the wire is there's gonna be threads here, and that's important. This is actually the portion where you're going to connect the screw through the L or Y connector on the lights. So now what you're gonna do is you're gonna take the piece that has the open threads on it. Okay, we're gonna set this piece aside just for a second. And you're going to thread the open end of the wire through this little opening here. Now, as you thread this through, it should be very easy, but it should be hard to pull back. Okay, this is how it's gonna hang without falling. But you should be able to pull from the top the wire, so essentially you can tighten this. And this is the mechanism that's gonna allow you to pull your lights up so they are flat when you get them mounted onto the ceiling. You can tighten this way, but if you need to loosen it, what you do is you push this portion here up and the ball bearing loosens, and now you can bring the wire back out. You take this piece with a little hole on the side of it. Now, this is going to be the portion that you mount to the ceiling. And then once you have thread your wire through the open thread portion of this, you then run the thread through the side hole of the portion you mount to the ceiling, like so. And what it will do is it will bring this open thread portion to here, and this is where you screw this in. Now, I'm not gonna screw it in all the way right now because I'm gonna have to unscrew it anyways, but just so you can see, this is then how this mounts to the top portion here to the ceiling. I have an L connector here, and this will be here, and you run the smaller screw through the connector here, and then it screws into this portion of the drop ceiling bracket. So essentially this hangs like this. So I have my two drills, one with the drill bit to drill the pilot hole for the drywall anchor, and then I also have my other drill to be able to screw in the screw into the portion that connects to the ceiling. Make sure that you also have your drywall anchors. So we're gonna take the screw that we're gonna screw into the drywall anchor, and we'll take this portion of the bracket that we mount to the ceiling, and we're gonna put this in through the top. So it comes out like that, okay? And I'll take my drill that fits in here so I can screw this in. I'm just showing you with the screwdriver now as a visual. I like to have the side hole of this portion facing towards me, so it's easier to see. Feed the wire through the side, and then we will screw this portion in. And then I'm actually gonna pull this wire tight a little bit so it's closer to this portion, maybe halfway to here. And I will feed this through this portion. So I'm just gonna pull this wire so it's somewhat snug and also supporting this light a little bit, like about there. And I'm gonna leave this excess wire coming out here right now. And now I have my drop ceiling bracket secure here, and we're gonna move on to the rest of them. As I was doing these drop ceiling brackets, on these ones over here, I was actually drilling into particle board. So I didn't need, and I really couldn't use the drywall anchors, but as I have moved this way, I noticed that I'm now going straight into drywall. Anytime you are going into drywall, or you go to drill this directly in, drill this screw directly in, and it is only drywall, remove the screw, drill the pilot hole, put the drywall anchor in, and then redo it. It's just gonna save you in the long run. And here's the thing, you don't want your lights falling and hitting your car. We finished installing the drop ceiling bracket to this portion, or this half of the lighting kit. If you're gonna hang the whole Hexagon lighting kit with the drop ceiling brackets, make sure that you plan that out, because there are not gonna be enough drop ceiling brackets to connect to every single Y or L connector. So make sure that it's evenly distributed around the outside of the hex lighting kit as well as through the middle to make sure that you can level it and it's supported enough that it won't fall off the ceiling. When we leveled the lighting kit on this half with the drop ceiling brackets, we essentially measured from this portion where we flush mounted the lights to the very top portion of the ceiling. And that measurement was 13.5 inches. So the 13.5 inches is essentially where we want the top of the lights measured to the very top portion of the ceiling. So what I did is I took the tape measure, I went to each hex light and each drop ceiling bracket. I raised the light so the top portion of the light was at 13.5 inches, and then I pulled the wire tight so then it sat at 13.5 inches. I went to each one of those and did that. So theoretically, each one of them is exactly 13.5 inches. And now this portion of the light setup is level. Now, whether you measure each bracket to a certain length to level it, or you use a level like this, either way it will work great for you. Now, I do just want to say, if it's an 1/8 or maybe a 1/16 of an inch off, I think you're going to be okay. It's not going to be as noticeable when it's up on your ceiling. Now, during the installation process, we actually took a break, not only to get a little bit of food, but we needed to make a run to the hardware store. Now, we needed a few components extra to the lighting kit to finish the installation, and mainly in regards to the power cord and getting the power cord fastened to the wall and or ceiling and then routing it to our power source. So what we're going to use as our power source is this light socket outlet. And what this does is you screw this in instead of a light bulb and it turns into a 2-prong outlet. The power cord is a 3-prong plug. So what we needed to do is buy a 3-prong to 2-prong adapter so we could plug it into our light socket outlet. If you are somebody that wants to hardwire this to the wiring in your home, hire an electrician and have them do it the right way. We do not take any responsibility or liability for anyone trying to wire stuff themselves and shocking themselves. Now we are going to route the power cord along the wall and along the ceiling over to our power source with the light socket adapter. Well, I gotta say, this is pretty cool. You know, this install was easy, pretty self-explanatory. You know, when you have dim lights or lights that's not powerful enough, you don't want to go out in your garage and do this and do any detailing for that matter. So during this install, there are a few things that I mentioned, okay? A few important things. Number one, if you can have someone help you, it makes this process a lot easier. Luckily, I had Chris, the camera guy, help me a little bit, just a second set of hands. More than enough help for me to do this process. Number two, if you're not somebody that wants to do this, if you don't want to do the DIY install, hire a professional, whether that be an electrician or a handyman, okay? It can make your life a lot easier, and maybe when it comes to wiring things for the power source, the electrician is more of a professional that can deal with that. Now, if you've watched this video and you don't have the kit yet and you're trying to figure out if you can do it yourself, you absolutely can. But if you have more questions about it, like specs on how many amps the lights pull, what type of outlet you need, or how you can get your lights to work, call us, call our customer service, 866-965-0400. We are here to help. And if anything, you know, we want to make sure, we want to inspire confidence so you know that you can do this. This is absolutely a DIY product. It's something that anybody can install in their garage. I hope that this product works for you. I know it will make your garage space look a lot better, and it will help you get out into the garage and get that therapy that you always want. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.